Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special edition of Conn and the Stick. I'm your host, Justin Connolly, with my co-host Nick Smith, and today we're going to take a little bit of a 180 with what we've been doing. Obviously, we've been breaking down the divisions, where we see they're going, breaking down the rosters, and going with records. But we're going to break it off really and go in a different direction. I know this is something that we talked about. We're going to do a fantasy football special, and I know we said it that. At the end of our last podcast, but we're really going to go, and so we are going in that direction today. So take a little bit of break. We'll get back on track next week with the breaking down the divisions and such. But we really want to do this fantasy football podcast because fantasy football is coming up, and it's really creeping up on us, and it's time that we start preparing for it.
Oh, yeah. Before you know it, preseason's going to be here, and the games are going to start rolling. And it's never too early to start preparing for your fantasy season. I know me, every year I do usually 2 or 3 teams. Most of my leagues are always with friends. From time to time I do with random people, but it's always something good to do during the season. It always keeps you invested. Like, say, I'm a Jets fan, so instead of just being invested in Jets games, other people can be invested in other teams. Like, oh, I got to watch out for this guy this day. It's just a good way to really get into football. Some people do it for money, some people just do it for fun, but whatever reason you're doing it, fantasy football is it's a great time and something entertaining to do for you. We both have had plenty of experience over the years. I've been doing fantasy football, I think, for maybe 10 years or so, and I do like 2 or 3 leagues a year, so how long you been going for?
I mean, I've been going since I believe 2011, and my thing is that really I've been playing for a while, and it's something that, like you said, it keeps me engaged not only with the Miami Dolphins and my team, but also it gives me an excuse to. I mean, not that I don't love watching other games, but I mean, yeah, and you really get invested in these games, other games like on the Red Zone channel. I mean, once I'm done watching the Dolphins, I throw the Red Zone channel right on and continue watching, but. Yeah, I mean, I've been playing for a while, and we're going to go right back to that in a second about our experiences just a little bit more in depth because I just want to tell you what the basis of this podcast is going to be. So this podcast is really going to be, this episode, I should say, is really going to specifically be for those who need a little bit of help when it comes to their fantasy team. Like, you can't win, you really don't find yourself doing really well. What we're trying to do here with this podcast is give you the tips and tricks of what we do every fantasy season in order to prepare and win your fantasy league. And like we said, I'm going back to experience, and what makes us qualified really to say and help you win your fantasy league. Obviously, from our podcast and what we talk about with the NFL, we know a lot about football, but it's not only that. Since starting in, I believe, 2011, I have, in leagues that I have managed for every, like, week by week and have managed well, I have only once not been in the top 4. Once. And it was this year. It was this year, last year. I blame that on a couple of injuries. I had key injuries that not only affected the player directly, but players around them. So Aaron Rodgers getting hurt really ruined Jordy Nelson's production for me. A couple injuries to quarterbacks and such like that. But other than that, I have never gotten anywhere less than 4th place. So I'm in the playoffs every year, except for one. So I think that qualifies as somebody that knows what they're doing and can manage a team well.
Oh, definitely. It's in fantasy football as an owner. It's being consistent. It's always important. In my 10 years, I know I've won, I think, 4 or 5 leagues. Last year, I had 3 leagues I was in. I won one of them, one of my friends' leagues. It's just, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it, and pre-draft and after draft. There's just a lot of things you got to keep your eyes on. Of course, there's luck that goes into it because injuries can happen at any point. One year I drafted Jimmy Graham his rookie season, like second to last pick, and dude goes off for like 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. So of course there's, you're gonna have your sleepers, you're gonna have your busts, but there's a lot that goes into a draft. there's a lot of skill. There's also a lot of luck, but a little bit of mixture of both, and you know what, you can find yourself on
Right.
top.
I mean, I have also won 4 to 5 leagues, even maybe even more in certain leagues. But because what I'll always do is I start with 3 NFL.com fantasy leagues, and then whatever ones that individuals that invite me to there. So where I have my family one, I've got obviously the one that you invite me to.
Yeah, my
Uh,
league, yeah,
yeah, and then the one I do with the football
the
team.
football
So
game. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I'm involved a lot in fantasy football, and it really helps doing a lot of leagues helps you with also the planning process. So how we're going to break this down is now we're going to talk about the pre-draft process. We're going to go into the draft. We're going to go with setting your lineup every week. The waiver wire. We're going to talk about the waiver wire. I've won fantasy leagues off the
Oh, the
waiver
waiver wire
wire.
is huge, no doubt.
And then we'll give you a couple guys that maybe we think that the reasoning behind why they're going to be good, why they're not going to be good, a couple sleepers, couple busts. So, yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah,
So,
man.
obviously, the pre draft process we have. It's really what the pre-draft process is just like any other draft or anything other that you do that's like tests, quizzes, stuff like that. It's research and it's studying. So a lot of what I do and what I know that you do is we read a lot of articles. We manage. We go on websites and read and do all this planning before we go into each draft.
Yeah, the big thing for a lot of players, you gotta pay attention in free agency. You know, people move around; they could be in a better situation, or someone that was making them really good could have left. There's a lot of things that go into it. You just gotta keep your eyes open. Just like Jordy Nelson, he's a great guy on Green Bay. He has Aaron Rodgers as quarterback now. He's going to Oakland. Derek Carr is solid, but he's not Aaron Rodgers, so is he going to have the same amount of production? You don't know. So it just there's always things you got to look into. Just rookie the draft. You know, the draft makes huge changes on people's depth charts positions, and it just many people don't know much about the rookies. I'm not huge on college football, so like that's something I have to look into. Uh, Many of you guys listening, maybe you're not into college football as well. It just there's a lot of things you gotta look into, not just the player itself, but you gotta look at the people around the player that could help him have a good season going forward.
Absolutely, and I think that obviously there's for just a couple of sources that I use. Really, when it comes to this, is there's a couple of guys that I read and listen to all the time. Michael Fabiano on NFL and the NFL Network is a guy that is very knowledgeable. I take a lot of what he says when it comes to fantasy football. Matt Barry on ESPN, another guy that you'll fall in love with if you take his advice because he seems to usually work. That's another professional fantasy football, and that just goes to show you how big fantasy football is. That they've got guys that have jobs and get paid to give you fancy advice. I mean, I mean,
Well,
taking a side note, that's living
well,
life right there.
ESPN, you know those no, they're smart for doing that because they know probably half or maybe more of the people that watch football. Well, mostly probably males do fantasy football. Like yeah, of course females do it, but it's more of a male dominated thing. But no, but it's definitely you gotta if you have any way to get people watching your show, Matt Berry promoting fantasy football, be like, oh, get this guy, get this guy. People are gonna tune in just so they have the chance to give their team that extra boost to win.
Yeah.
So why
So
not?
absolutely, and then obviously one of the biggest things and my biggest source really when it comes to planning out and doing my research for fantasy football really is Bleacher Report because they have a whole. When you go on Bleacher Report, it's an app, uh, but they they have a specific tab in the NFL section just for fantasy football. So that's something that I go on constantly when I'm starting to plan really and get really in depth with my planning for fantasy football because it just gives you so much advice. It gives you guys that are looking good, not looking so good, and that goes when it comes to keeping track of OTAs and training camp, which is big because obviously you got to keep an eye on off-season workouts to see how your guys are doing. If they're not having good off-season workouts, I mean, how productive are they going to be during the season? If they're having really good outstanding off-season workouts, they might be pretty good during the season. and Bleacher Report keeps track of that. I know Bleacher Report really helped me out 2 years ago when you were in this league. You did. We had an auction draft, and
Yeah.
all during Bleacher Report was reporting how good Michael Thomas from the Saints was doing as a rookie, and we had an auction draft, and I said Michael Thomas, Saints wide receiver. Everyone around the room gave me a blank stare. Nobody knew who he was. I knew who he was because I read about him a lot. I got him for $1. $1 his rookie year. Now look how good he is. Got him last year for $6 because it was a keeper league. That's the kind of research that goes into the fact that like it's big because reading about this stuff and knowing that this is a guy like Michael Thomas, that's how it goes. And I mean, I look at the sheet right now. He went from a rookie 2 years ago to being the 5th ranked wide receiver. I mean, it's the little research like that really of just even keeping track. And I know you can even put notifications on your phone, so like it's not like you forget to do it. You can put notifications on your phone that'll alert you that certain things are going on, and that'll really help.
Oh yeah, no. Any little boost you could get is certainly gonna help. Just like I said, like maybe it was like 6, 7 years ago, I got Jimmy Graham with the second to last pick, and dude was an absolute monster his rookie year. So you're always gonna get those. You know what? They could say someone's doing good. You know what? Maybe it won't pan out. But you know what? When it does pan out, like it did with Michael Thomas, like it did with Jimmy Graham. You know what? Maybe it's just a Saints thing, and maybe if you're a rookie on the Saints, look at Alvin Kamara last year, and just they all seem to have great seasons.
There you
So.
go, rookie on the Saints.
Rookie
Start
on the
taking them.
Saints, yeah, that's a good way to go.
Start taking them. So I mean, the basis of the pre-draft process and is you got to do your research. If this is something serious, and obviously I know that a lot of us gamble and put some money on this. If it's important to you, you're going to do the research for it. So that's the first thing is that you know what, we say it again, but it's research when it comes to this pre-draft process and just being prepared. Obviously, they give you pre-draft rankings, and they'll give you rankings on whatever it is that you happen to be doing your fantasy league on, NFL.com, ESPN. I know I have one on Yahoo. They'll give you that, and I'll tinker with it too, because I think that, I know a lot about football, and I'll move maybe a couple guys around that I think are going to be good, aren't going to be good, et cetera, but we'll get to that. And then obviously mock drafts. Mock drafts is a huge thing. I'll do a lot of mock drafts. Whenever I'm not doing something and I'm bored, I'll just go in there and I'll do mock drafts, and that helps me plan out because that allows me to know I'll mock draft against computers, I'll mock draft against other people. Obviously, NFL.com's got a mock draft system where you can plan out against different people, tinker with your lineups, and just the practice makes perfect. And the one thing I got to say with mock drafts is if you can draft at different positions, that really helps because it'll show you what guys you're going to get at which positions.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. You got when you do mock drafts, you can't choose the same spot over and over. You got to try out different locations. Like you never know where you're going to be, so you got to have a good idea who's going to be there when your turn comes up. Also, another thing with mock drafts, they have 10-team mock drafts, they have 12-team mock drafts, because I know not every league's the same. Some have 10 teams, some have 12. And it makes a huge difference, because 12-team league, you're maybe looking at maybe 6 tight ends, 7 tight ends that are actually really solid on a consistent basis, and then after that, it kind of falls off. So
yeah.
you got to know how many teams are in your league, and knowing the depth of each position is kind of big because you got to make sure you get someone good in that spot. So mock drafts are good to just get familiar with your location and maybe how other people draft. And even if you could do mock drafts with people you know that are going to be in your league, you could get a little bit of a head start thinking, oh, I know this guy may go in this direction, or he likes this guy, he's not a big fan of this guy. It's just so maybe you can get someone a little bit later, or maybe if you really want someone, you have to pick them a little earlier than usual. But mock drafts are definitely, it's great practice. Like you said, it's just practicing for a test almost.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, mock draft something you do?
Oh, certainly. I probably do like 2 or 3 before I do an actual draft. So
yeah, I mean, it's just a practice thing, and I mean, if you know where you're going to be, most people don't know where they're going to end up drafting from because they randomize it. Obviously, the way that my drafts go so far is number one. I know exactly where I'm slotted in one league, and the other one's an auction draft. So I mean, I know. I mean, I've been practicing a lot at where I placed last year because we just are doing it like almost like the NFL. Last teams go first, and etc. Last team goes first, second to last team goes second, etc., etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, I've been practicing a lot. I mean, every time I find myself where I'm not doing something else, I'll go do it because it's a prep thing, and I think mock drafts really help me when it comes to this process. Now we're going to get into draft time. So you've done your research, you've done your mock drafts. Now it's draft time. But I mean, you're on the clock. Where do you go?
First round, I am 100. I'm not saying 100%, but you got to be looking to take a running back in the first round, just because there's not many. There are good running backs out there, but they dwindle out much quicker than any other position. There's four guys right off the top: Gurley, Bell, Elliott, and David Johnson. They're all outstanding. They call do it all. Also, you gotta know if your league's PPR or not, because that is a huge.
For those of you that don't know what PPR is,
Yeah.
it's point per reception. So every time you catch the ball, every time somebody catches the ball, it's a point.
Yeah, no, honestly, it's huge because I had Le'Veon Bell. Maybe he didn't have a great game rushing, but he caught like 10 balls. So he got me 10 points right there, right off the bat. So first round, though, you got to be looking to take a running back, especially if you have those first four picks, because after the second, third round, the position really dies out really quickly because a lot of teams are using two running back sets. They split carries. If you could get a guy that's getting the ball, that's in the game for 85, 90% of the plays, it would be a poor decision not to take advantage of that. But of course, there are some receivers out there that are phenomenal. You look at Antonio Brown, hard to pass up on, but I think he's more of a fifth, fourth slot type of guy. It just everyone has their own opinion on people, but you got to go at least. I would say a running back, at least the first or second round, no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it really is as much as you can get. It's a lot of value, and you got to see what kind of value you're getting out of your guys. Obviously, I look at, like you said, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, Ezekiel Elliott. A little bit shaky with David Johnson coming off his injury, but I mean, you got to draft off of value. And obviously, the thing with running backs is the fact that I look at it this way, and you're going to get production out of some of your running backs. But the thing is that as the draft goes on, I mean, you look at it this way. You're going to run out of depth because of the fact that you're really only looking, you look at this from a football standpoint. I mean, how many running backs on each team really touch the ball? Two? Maybe if you're lucky, three. Wide receivers, I mean, 4, 5, maybe even 6 guys catch the ball so you can get some points out of that. So, I mean, it's just a depth thing when it comes to running back. And it's not just because this guy isn't good. Maybe he's just not getting enough carries. I mean, I had that problem with Joe Mixon last year. He was in a 3 running back rotation. He's not getting a lot of carries. His production dwindled. That was one of those guys I heard about all camp being good, but I mean, 3 running back rotation, they're trying to get all these guys carries, but it's just a depth thing. So that's why running back is so important. But obviously, I'm not going to take a guy maybe over Antonio Brown or DeAndre Hopkins, who have just been so productive and what they do, just a weekend basis. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is a guy that I don't know if he had less than 10 points all season.
Yeah, the dude was game. Unbelievable, and his quarterback play.
Same with Antonio Brown.
Yeah, but even Hopkins, like he had Watson, of course, he was going off of Watson, but then after that, like he got hurt, and he still did pretty well with the backup end. So
absolutely.
But yeah, just like you said, but those top 4 guys or so, like it just. Like last year in my league that I won, I had number 1 pick. I took Le'Veon Bell just because I thought he was just the most complete back. Ezekiel Elliott was facing that suspension, so I wasn't going near that direction. And I came all the way back around, pick number 20. Todd Gurley had an off year the year before, so I snagged Todd Gurley with pick number 2, and I had the 1 and 2 best running backs in the league, and I ended up winning. So
that's incredible.
And Todd Gurley, I think the last 3 weeks, all playoff weeks, I think he dropped like 35, 40 fantasy points.
The crazy thing is that I'm pretty sure my uncle at last year, he ended up coming in second against me. He had not last year, but the year before that, he had David Johnson, he had Ezekiel Elliott, and he had Le'Veon Bell.
That's I think Bell was suspended that year to start the season, right? I think that's probably how that happened. I
Yeah.
think 3 games. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, you can't make that up. You have the best 3 running backs in football. Like, it's just incredible how some things like that happen. But yeah, I mean, we take a running back first. I'll usually take a wide receiver second, or if I take a wide receiver first, I take a running back second. But I feel like those 2 positions are really the most important in football and like in fantasy football.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would say you could go running back, receiver. I know I actually went running back, tight end, just because I took Travis Kelsey because at that point
Oh yeah, I took Travis Kelsey
I
early.
figured Travis Kelsey was as good as having a wide receiver because that's another thing. Tight ends, it's another position. You got like 6 guys, 7 guys or so that are really good. You got Gronk, Kelsey, Ertz, Olsen, Graham, Walker's good. Evan Ingram's he's good, but he's not the top tier guy. But then after that, like you see a big drop off. So I would certainly try to snag one of those guys if you could, because you're gonna be in round 7, round 8, and you're still gonna have solid receivers out there. Of course, they're not gonna be the playmaking guys like Odell and Antonio Brown, but they're still gonna get you probably 12, 13 points, depending on if it's point per reception or not. But
Yeah.
it's just like some positions you gotta know the depth. And you got to make sure you fill those positions as quickly as possible, which is one reason why I'm not too keen on taking a quarterback high up in the
That's
draft.
just what I was going to
Yep.
say. Obviously, quarterback is the most important position in the NFL and in football. Not so much in fantasy football.
Certainly not.
I mean, you can get a lot of production out of a lot of guys. You don't necessarily need to reach so far for Aaron Rodgers. I know one of the people in my leagues, in my family league, took Aaron Rodgers with like their first pick, and I mean, that's not really necessary. Like, you don't need to stretch so far for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, obviously, if he's on the board at a reasonable position, then yeah, go ahead and take him. But I mean, my way of thinking of it is that you're still going to get a lot of production out of a lot of guys.
Number 12, Phillip Rivers. You know, you're going to be the last person in the league, even if you're in a 12-person
Right.
league taking a quarterback, and you're still going to get someone that's probably going to give you 2
Right,
touchdowns.
and I look at these names. I look at Aaron Rodgers. I look at Russell Wilson. Well, I mean, Russell Wilson is going to do what he can. Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, Cam Newton, Carson Wentz, Drew Brees, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, Ben Roethlisberger. We'll see where Jimmy Garoppolo does. And Phillip Rivers, like, yeah, those are all guys that can get you at least, I would say, 20.
Close to 20.
20.
Yeah, if you get 20 points from your quarterback, you know,
I don't even see Matt Ryan there. Matt Ryan is still a guy that gets me a lot of fantasy points. So, I mean, it's just a matter of, like, you know what? You're so many quarterbacks that throw the ball a lot. It's a throwing league. So, I mean, usually my benchmark when it comes to taking a quarterback is 4th or 5th round. But the thing is that you can't wait too long to get a quarterback, because I did that last year because I thought I was going to get a lot of production out of Jameis Winston. Because I read all about him saying he was going to have a breakout year. He did all right, but the thing is that I didn't have a lot of depth behind him either.
Yeah, I could agree. I want to say round 6 is where I really started thinking about taking a quarterback. I think I ended up Derek Carr, who had a off year from the previous year, and I think my backup was. I honestly think I had Eli, and he had an awful year. So even though I had 2 really bad quarterbacks, I still ended up winning my league just because dominant running back play, great tight end play, and solid receiver play. Like quarterbacks, you know what? Even if they don't have the greatest game, they're still always going to. It's not every day a quarterback doesn't go throw a touchdown. They're always going to at least get 1 or maybe 2 in there. They're going to get you some points.
Right.
They're not going to get you Aaron Rodgers points every week throwing you. Well, it also depends. Some leagues are 6 points for passing touchdowns. Some others are 4. That's something y'all look into. That's actually a big difference. If you do get those extra 2 points, maybe you would be willing to maybe go a little bit earlier on a quarterback. But most of the leagues I'm in are only 4 points for passing touchdown. It just, you think about it, you're getting touchdowns from running backs and receivers. You're also getting 6 points. You're not getting 4. So, and if you're getting a receiver or running back that's getting a point every single time they're catching a ball, it's kind of hard to pass up on running backs and receivers, especially when the running back position is not as doesn't have as much depth as the QB position does.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you want to plan for depth, but and you want to you want to get a good quarterback, but I mean it's one of those things that you know what you don't need to necessarily reach for one. So and then moving on to that, I mean obviously I had the point was tight ends more valuable than the draft rankings make them, obviously for the reasons why you said it. So I don't really need to go any more depth in that. But my thing is the biggest thing, and it's this is really where it gets a lot of people that don't necessarily, I guess, necessarily know a lot about football and don't do the research. Really, it gets them because when you go on Yahoo and you go on ESPN, you go on NFL.com, obviously you're following a ranking system that they put in from their experts for their guys that that do it, and they set a rankings chart of where each guy is valued at. And the biggest mistake that people make, and what makes me capitalize on it, is the fact that they rely too much on a ranking system and they take the best guy that they got available at every time. And the way that I do it is that I don't necessarily agree with the ranking system. I'll maybe even go 3 or 4 guys down if I say, you know what, I actually like that guy and I read about that guy, and that guy is not a second or a third wide receiver, but he's a first on maybe a lesser team. And that's the thing, is that the biggest thing that I capitalize on is that ranking system, because of the fact that I take advantage of the fact that some people don't know necessarily as much football as I do, and they go ahead and they take the best guy that's available on the board, but who may be a second or third wide receiver, and I go ahead and I take a lesser one that is actually a 1, and that's the guy they're throwing the ball to the most because that's the best playmaker on their team. So I think that the biggest mistake really with, and that at least I see, is relying too much on the ranking system.
Oh yeah, honestly, I barely go off the ranking system when I draft because I'm just looking at this ranking system right here. I see Adam Thielen rated as the 11th best receiver. I'd probably draft him over 2 or 3 guys I see over him right now. It just there's some guys I'm looking at. I'm not huge fans of just because either their supporting cast around them isn't all that great, or like you said, if you're number one receiver on a team, even though you're on a poor team, you're going to get targets and you're going to get the ball thrown to you. It doesn't matter how good your team is. They're going to give you
Right.
opportunities to put points on for their team and for your fantasy team. So you got to look into little things. It's not in fantasy football, it's not always X's and O's. There's little other things that go into it. It's just like, yeah, like that team may not be that good, but that's the only solid player on the offense, so they're gonna force feed him the ball. It's like you look at the Bills, LaShawn McCoy, he is easily the best player on that offense. Yeah, teams are gonna key on him on what for their defenses, but you know he's gonna probably run the ball 25 times a game, and he's probably gonna get close to 7 targets or so because he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, if you know a lot about what the Philadelphia Eagles did last year, I look at it and I say, you know what, even tier 4, and you get it, Jay Ajayi, really good running back, but he's splitting the carries between 3 guys. I look at a guy like, and obviously you don't know too much about him, Rashad Penny is a guy that I love during the draft process for the rookies, and that's a guy that's probably going to get a majority of the carries for the Seahawks. So I would take Rashad Penny over Jay Ajayi because of the fact that you don't know how much production he's going to get because he's sharing a lot of carries with him, and that's what the little things that you got to know. How much are they going to be splitting the ball? Christian McCaffrey might even he did good. I don't think he was phenomenal, but I mean, that's a guy that now that Jonathan Stewart's gone, and you know what, maybe they do add C.J. Anderson, but we don't know how much they're going to use C.J. Anderson. But the thing is that Christian McCaffrey's a guy that is going to get more carries. So obviously those are things that you key on. I look at the wide receiver rankings, and I look at, Stephon Diggs. Nothing against Stephon Diggs with his production level, but I might go down 1, 2, 3 more spots to get Alshon Jeffrey instead because of the fact that he's the number 1 guy on the Eagles. So, and then I look at Aaron Robinson. I'd probably take Allen Robinson maybe over Stephon Diggs or Amari Cooper because of the fact that Amari Cooper, maybe he is the number 1 wide receiver.
They got Nelson now too.
Yeah,
so
but they got They
Yeah.
got Jordy Nelson. They got Martavis Bryant.
Yeah, they got some guys there now. So
So, I mean, the ball's probably going to get spread out a little bit more. And Allen Robinson, if he can maintain the production level that he did the year previous, that's a steal at that position, because you're taking guys that aren't necessarily going to be getting the ball as much, and you're just going off production level. So, I mean, yeah, those are just a couple of examples that I have of just the fact that, maybe it is better that you take guys that aren't necessarily on the ranking system, that aren't ranked over certain guys, but definitely something that to keep an eye on, because you can take advantage of a lot of people and exploit a lot of different things by just paying attention to certain things like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. You just gotta pay attention at all times. And one thing I actually wanted to bring up, because I don't know how you feel about this, but it's one thing I always looked into as a owner. Kickers and defenses. I know many people feel different ways about them.
Oh, a kicker and a defense can change. It can actually change a game.
I am 100% on that board. When people take kickers with their very last pick, I'm just thinking to myself, that guy's going to be in your starting lineup every single week.
Every week.
And, yeah, it's good to have backup receivers and backup running backs because people get hurt or maybe want to make changes. But I would not wait too long to take a kicker in a defense, because if you could get a guy like Justin Tucker who's hitting you 2 50-yard field goals, that's 10 points right there. And it's not even counting anything else he does the rest of the game.
Right.
And sometimes kickers have won me games by hitting 4 or 5 field goals.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie.
An example of that is, I was carried one week by Greg Zerline, who had 5 field goals. 5 field goals. I mean, it's 17 points, something like that. I mean, 17 points from a kicker. So, I mean, that's exactly, and I really do like that point, is the fact that maybe you take a kicker a little bit earlier than the rankings say, and what, people take it here. But the thing is that your kickers can get so good that you will drop other guys to keep your kicker and pick up an extra one. Oh, yeah. I would not drop Greg Zerline until he got hurt. Like, it was just, I couldn't do it because he was grabbing me so many points, so many weeks in a row. I mean, a kicker can really change or make or break a season.
For someone that's in your starting lineup every single week, who it's consistently part of your game, part of the reason why you win or lose, I don't see why people wait so long. Same with defenses. Like they don't, of course, they're not like the sexy pick, but like, if you could go out there and get a Rams defense
or Jacksonville defense or an Eagles defense,
you gotta capitalize on that. Like, they get a pick 6, they get some sacks. You know what? Instead of giving up 28 points and getting -2 points, your defense is getting you 14 points. Like, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, I had the Vikings defense in 2 leagues, and I wouldn't get rid of them because of the fact, and like, I didn't get rid of them all season because it was just a production level, and they weren't getting me negative points. And you don't wait till the last pick to get a defense. I mean, it's the same thing.
Number 2 on the rankings.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing with kind of drafting kickers too, is you got to know the guys. Obviously, you got the Justin Tucker and
Gostowski,
the Matt Prater, who their team necessarily doesn't score. But the way I take my kickers is the fact that which offenses are going to score the most. I mean, I look at Chris Boswell and how many points he put up last season because of the fact that he's kicking an extra point because this team's putting up 20-some, 30 points a game. So, I mean, every time you score a touchdown and they make an extra point, you get a point. So, I mean, there's an art to taking like a kicker too that people need to know. And obviously, one of the teams, and there's the same with the art of defenses. I mean, I usually take the defenses that I know are going to exploit the 3 teams that they play in their division.
Certainly, yeah.
So, I mean, there's a certain way that you do that, and I really do. That's a great point that you brought up about kickers and defenses. Definitely something to really keep in mind while you're drafting. When is a good time to take your kicker? And you know what? You don't take them with the first half of your picks, but definitely it's very important.
Yeah, I would probably. You got to get your starting 2 running backs, your starting 2 receivers. I assume most leagues have a flex. You got to take your flex. So 2 running backs, 2 receivers, tight end, flex, quarterback, maybe a backup probably a backup running back, backup receiver, and then I think in that area is probably a good spot for a defense to start looking. I would take the defense first and then the kicker probably if I were to choose.
Absolutely. But yeah, so we got through this draft portion. We drafted our team. Yeah, and we're ready. We're ready for the thing. But the thing is now, here comes the tricky part, and that's setting your lineup. It's setting your lineup every single week. So, what are certain things that you do when it comes to setting your lineup every week?
Well, first thing I do, I look at the matchups every week. You guys see who you guys are playing against. Of course, you got guys like your top draft picks. You're not going to bench them. You draft them that high. You didn't draft them that high to bench them. But like your middle end guys, like maybe your bench receiver has a better matchup against a weaker defense that week, and they could possibly get more points than someone that's going against Jacksonville. Maybe he's getting covered by Jacksonville cornerback and Jalen Ramsey, and you don't think he's going to have a good week. Going into the season, you also got to pay attention to bye weeks. Bye weeks, some of you should actually pay attention during the drafts as well. You don't want to be drafting people that have the same bye weeks, because then you're just going to have to drop one of them anyway to put someone in your starting spot. So
Yeah, so I mean, an example of that is really, you gotta. So say like you got a Jerick McKinnon who's playing against a Rams defense. That's a tough matchup. I mean, you don't know how many points you're gonna get from that. And then you all of a sudden you look on your bench and you say, well, Jerick McKinnon. Well, I got Dion Lewis. And you know what? Dion Lewis is maybe he's a second. He's behind Derrick Henry, but he's playing a Colts defense. And Dion Lewis, I'm expecting, even though Derrick Henry's probably going to be the starter, he's still going to be a third down back, still a guy that you have got to bring out of the backfield on passing plays. So, I mean, I'm putting Dion Lewis in there over Jerick McKinnon because of the fact that I like that matchup a little bit better. Another example, where's the
which one are you looking for?
The wide receiver. Yeah, so, I mean, I look at Demaryius Thomas. Demaryius Thomas is playing a Chargers defense that has got Casey Hayward. That's a tough matchup. I mean, but then I could go down there and I see Chris Hogan. Chris Hogan's on my bench. So, and Chris Hogan's playing a Dolphins defense where the secondary isn't as good as it's been. So I know I'm throwing shade at my own team. But,
it's all good. I would too.
But yeah, I'm playing Chris Hogan over Demaryius Thomas because I like the matchup better. So, I mean, it's just a lot of, like you said, it's just knowing the matchups, trusting them. One of the things I actually look at every week around Tuesday and Wednesday, the NFL.com will come out with a start 'em, sit 'em every week, and I believe it's Mike Fabiano that does it. So they will tell you the matchups that they like. They'll have their start of the week. They'll have other guys, and then they'll have their sit-ems. So they'll say, you know what, this guy doesn't like. We don't like the matchup with this guy. We don't like the matchup with this guy. Oh, Cam Newton's playing the Saints defense, so maybe bench him this week. But Matt Stafford, he's playing the Bears defense, so that's a guy that you want to start this week because the Bears have given up, and they'll get really statistical with it. Oh, the Bears have given up the third most points to fantasy quarterbacks this season, and say it's around like week 6. So, I mean, it's just certain it's that actually helps me a lot when it comes to, like, I have a pretty good idea in what the matchups are, but if I'm really stuck between two guys, that's the first thing I'm doing is going to NFL Start 'em, sit 'em, and that's a really good resource to have.
Oh, no, those resources are good to have. I actually used to not look at them. My own father actually was the one that actually got me into it because my dad used to look into those things all the time. He'd be like, oh, this defense is they're good against running backs, but they're not so good against a quarterback. So it's just something, they'll have that little bit of extra information that most people wouldn't know because you're not calculating how many fantasy points a quarterback has against a certain defense or something like that. But these guys get paid to do it, and if they're giving you the information for free, you know what? Why not use it?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing is that, one of the things that the next point I'm going to make is also, obviously, you got to be able to replace guys that are on your bye week, and that goes with draft time, too. Say I draft, you need to pay attention. This goes back, obviously, like I said, to the draft. You got to pay attention to bye weeks, and because you can draft what seems to be a really good team. You get Todd Gurley, you get Kareem Hunt. That doesn't seem realistic, but I'm just going off of it for the basis of you draft the Rams defense, but those are 3 guys that are all on week 12 bye weeks. you're going to suffer that week 12 and because you drafted too many guys with the same bye week. So I think that if you're in between, look at the bye weeks, look at your team. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes I've seen people that have gone, they don't do it purposely, but just they full out go bye weeks on one week. They blow that week and call it a day and
Because
just
they're
move to the
stuck.
next week. Yeah. But if you're late in the season and you really need a win and you got 3 or 4 of your best guys on a bye week, you're in a bind because you ain't dropping those guys and you're picking up maybe 4 guys for free agency. It's most likely not going to get the job done. So I usually like to have maybe 1 or 2 guys a week on a bye, maybe 3, depending if I get a steal somewhere down the line. But you also got to do it by position because you can't have 3 receivers on the same bye week. Like maybe you could spread it out like a quarterback or running back, but like you also got to make sure positional wise that you put yourself in a situation that you're not going to like put yourself in handcuffs and probably lose that week.
Exactly. Yeah, so I mean that's another thing to keep an eye on is obviously you got to keep an eye on bye weeks. You want to make sure that you're not putting yourself into a hole. I mean, yeah, it's only going to be 1 week, and you say to yourself, I can drop that week, but it could be a pivotal week. You can find yourself really on the brink of a playoff game, and because a playoff berth, and you might ruin it because you couldn't have secured that week 12 win because of the fact that all your guys are on bye weeks. So definitely something to keep an eye on. And now this comes to the saving grace of our podcast, and one of the things that people will make a living off of if they do it right: the waiver wire, also the free agency in fantasy football. How many times has the waiver wire saved your season?
Like the waiver wire is after the draft. The waiver wire is easily the second most important thing in the draft, in my opinion, because injuries are going to happen, no doubt about it. A guy that was maybe not seeing any carries at all, he may get 18 carries next week just because the number one guy gets hurt. It's just something you got to pay attention to at all times. You got to make sure you know who's out there. You got to know what you need as a team. Um, just like Jamal Charles, he was supposed to play last year, and then they kept pushing him back. They kept pushing him back. And then maybe some leagues Hunt wasn't drafted. And you know what? He explodes week 1, and then you got 10 people rushing to get him.
Right.
It all depends on, of
When you
course,
take
your
them.
positioning of like the waiver wire. Some leagues are different. It goes on record, points, however it goes. But if you could get that steal in free agency, it could change your whole
Right.
season.
And I mean, that goes back to the whole fact that, people are going to get injured. Obviously, it hurt people that had Aaron Rodgers. He got hurt last season. It hurt people that had Allen Robinson. If they drafted early, they'd hurt him last season. So, I mean, but the thing I would say that really something you could do on the waiver wire is, you draft Keenan Allen, but he gets hurt because, Keenan Allen has had a history of being injured in this league. So, but the thing is that am I going to go to a different guy on a different team? How about you go to the guy on the same team who might get more,
Take his spot. Yeah.
who takes his spot?
Yeah.
Because that's the safest thing you can do. One example, Dalvin Cook. Really sad to see him get injured last year after all the production he had. I didn't have Dalvin Cook in any of my leagues. I should have, as much as I raved about him and during the NFL draft last year. But he gets hurt. First thing I do, put in a waiver wire for Jerick McKinnon. Big. It was big. He got me, there was a couple games, 3 games, I think he got me 20-some points. So, I mean, you go really off of instinct. You go for the guys that are the backups.
Oh yeah, no, you gotta do that. It's certainly huge. Just I don't think this was actually it was just a performance based thing. Martavis Bryant wasn't doing all that well last year. And I put in a waiver wire and I picked up Juju Schuster-Smith, and dude has a
Smith-Schuster.
Smith-Schuster, and he has a great season. He was number 2 receiver, of course, behind Antonio Brown, but in a pivotal final championship game I had him in, I'm pretty sure he dropped like 20 points for me. So there's certainly
Yeah.
guys out there that, you know what, not only the injury thing, it could be a performance thing. Someone's not performing well, you pick up his backup. Maybe he's going to have more opportunities to show himself, and if he has a good week or two, NFL teams, they're not afraid to make a change if they need to do so. So they'll put you
Absolutely.
in there if you're performing.
Absolutely, and you can make a killing off of the waiver wire, obviously, with injuries and personnel changes and stuff like that. Uh, some of your best guys can come from that waiver wire. I mean, obviously, going back to injuries, what was it, 2 years ago? Uh, Kendall Langford from the Bears gets hurt. I put in a waiver wire for Jordan Howard. He ended up rushing for the second most yards in the NFL. It's stuff like that, and obviously there was a personnel change in quarterbacks for the Packers when Aaron Rodgers got hurt, and I ended up winning this league. I was struggling. It was I was in the bottom half. I wasn't going to make the playoffs. I wasn't getting enough production from my flex. That's why. So all of a sudden, because Aaron Rodgers wasn't throwing to Devontae Adams, he gets dropped. What do? I go and pick him up because there's a personnel change. Blew me away, and it blew the competition away because that guy was picking up in a PPR league was picking me up no less than 15 points a game. The game against the Browns, I won major because of the fact that he had 30 points that week. I mean, it's just you got to know which guys are doing which. But the thing is, with the waiver wire, you got to watch out for the one-hit wonder, and obviously there's a couple of guys I remember from last year. Obviously, it's tough when it comes to week one. When you're like, wow, this guy performed well in week one, you go and pick him up. It's different because Kenny Golladay from the Detroit Lions was a guy I picked up after week one because he had 19 points and 19 fantasy points because he caught 2 touchdowns, one on a deep ball. So I went and picked him up. He did very little for me after that, and I didn't really play him, though. I just want to keep an eye on his production. Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end from the Arizona Cardinals, I think caught 2 or 3 touchdowns in one game, had like 24, 25 points or something like that. I didn't really pick him up because the rest of it was really late in the season. Like maybe, actually, no, I would say midway through the season where he was like, yeah, week 10, but I didn't pick him up because of the fact that the production level before that was like 0.4, 1.3, 0, 0. So you got to be careful with the one-hit wonder because you might end up dropping somebody that might have more consistent value for somebody that did good one game but isn't going to do good for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you actually brought up a pretty good point that I was thinking. This even goes into your draft. When you're thinking about taking someone free agency or in draft, I would always lean more towards a consistent player than an explosive player. A guy could drop 35 points for you. Like he could catch long balls, the big play. Maybe Ted Ginn Jr. He's a guy that could catch 60-yard touchdowns. But I'd rather have a guy that's gonna consistently get you a 10-yard catch on like every possession or so, because he's gonna be involved in the offense every single week. He's like a guaranteed 15 points compared to a guy that one week could go for 25, the next week maybe goes for 3. It's tough to win. You'll win your games with that, but when it comes to playoff time and you got a guy giving you a giant dud of like 1 or 2 points, it's tough to win with that. So free agency and draft wise, I always look for a guy that that's consistently going to perform for you each and every week. So I think you made me think of that when you were talking about keeping a consistent player.
So I mean, it is a consistency thing, and I like consistency. You know what? I'd rather take a guy that's getting me 8-9 points a week than a guy that's going to get me 16 one week and 1 the next. So it's just a matter of knowing what production level your guys are getting at. And I mean, there's a button. I mean, and the thing is that fantasy football and these websites try to help you out as much as they can. And there's a little button where you can look at their stats. What did they pick up week 1 and 2 and 5 and 7 and stuff like that. So it's just keeping a track and knowing that, you know what, maybe this guy will be good because, I picked up one guy because he was like on the free agency because, it was 8 and then 9 and then 12, something like that. So there's consistency on that. And that also goes with starting your lineup. Maybe he is in a tough matchup, but the thing is that he's putting up consistent numbers. You keep him in because, he's putting you up consistent enough numbers and maybe he will do well. So it's just a matter of knowing which guys are consistent and which guys are not. And now that you got the basis of what fantasy football is, what we do. We went through all the stages really of fantasy football. The pre-draft process, the draft, setting your lineup, and the waiver wire. Let's talk about a couple of guys that we see being good guys, like good guys to pick up at certain positions, and guys that maybe we're a little bit skeptical about going into next season. And obviously, we're going to exclude the guys like Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham's, Todd Gurley's, Le'Veon Bell's, Ezekiel Elliott's. So the big name guys, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. So how about we start with quarterbacks? And what's your guy that you're expecting to have a guy that you would say, you know what, let's take him?
I'm every draft I go into, I'm always looking at one guy, honestly, just because he fits where I want to draft a quarterback. Because I'm not trying to draft him early. Like I said, I usually draft my quarterback. I draft him a little bit later than you do. I usually go like seventh round or so. Philip Rivers is always a guy that I'm always looking at. Just Keenan Allen has been, when he is healthy, he's been great, and Melvin Gordon has certainly stepped up his game. And just the Chargers as a whole are just a much better team. And Philip Rivers, he's consistent. Like, he's what I'm looking for. He's one of those guys. He's gonna drop great amount of points for you every week, and he's not even ranked in the top 10. He's ranked number 12 on this list that I have here. So in 10-team leagues, according to this list, he's your backup quarterback. And honestly, in my eyes, this guy's a starter. He puts up great numbers every week. I look at guys above him. Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not big on Jimmy Garoppolo. He had a great year last year. He was undefeated, but fantasy-wise, Philip Rivers is a guy in my eyes I'd rather have. And then just looking up towards the top of the draft, that wouldn't really. Russell Wilson's a guy I was never big on, even when they were winning Super Bowls and all. Fantasy wise, just wasn't really into the whole running quarterback thing. Like Cam Newton, I would go with just because he's more durable. But when you're a smaller guy running the ball, such as Russell Wilson, injuries are going to happen just like last year, and it hurt him and it hurt his team. So
Yeah.
it's just one direction.
Yeah. So I
Stay
mean,
away from.
one guy that I'm actually looking at as being a big fantasy quarterback is Kirk Cousins, because he's put up solid fantasy numbers really with a lot less talent around him, and now he goes to Minnesota. He's got Adam Thielen. He's got Stephon Diggs. He's got Dalvin Cook to even throw the ball to. Kyle Rudolph, a good offensive line. So I'm expecting Kirk Cousins that's one of the guys I'm expecting to even be where I'm drafting is even a guy that I'm looking to be my starter, and a guy that I'm looking that's going to be iffy that even I would take him as a backup. Not too sure is it's Jimmy Garoppolo, because of the fact that not because of what he did last season. I'm not too big on. You know what? I loved seeing the Jimmy Garoppolo train. Like, it was great to see that a guy like that can leave the Patriots and but go and be successful for a lesser team and win 5 games. I mean, he's 5-0 as a starter there in San Francisco. Yeah, well, you know what? I think he won 1 game with the Patriots. As a starter, obviously that week 1 matchup against Arizona, but he's 5-0 as a starter. But the thing is, I look around him, and how much talent does he really have around him? And that's one of the things you got to look at when you're drafting a quarterback. I mean, what do they got around him? He really doesn't have that much to work with. So I mean, I'm looking at Jimmy Garoppolo. Really is be wary of taking him as a consistent starter. Running backs.
Running backs. I was actually looking at a few names. Not that I'm saying this is definitely a guy that should go early, but I'm just very interested to see how he starts off his NFL career. And Saquon Barkley, like, he's gonna be a stud. We know that, but I wonder how much the Giants are really gonna dive into him week 1 and week 2. Like, how much they're really gonna rely on him, because no, they got Eli. He's getting older. How many times is he really gonna step back to throw? Certainly a guy should be high on everyone's lists. Just me personally, I'm just very curious to see where how the Giants are going to utilize him and someone as talented as he is. But looking down the list a little bit more, you mentioned earlier Derrick Henry. DeMarco Murray's gone. He's the number 1 guy there. He's going to be taking most of the load. Tennessee's a solid team, playoff team last year. And Derrick Henry is someone I can see having improved performance from last year. And same thing, basically another same situation. Rookie last year, Christian McCaffrey, especially if it's a point per reception league. This guy's gonna have plenty of chances to catch the ball. They love using him out of the backfield. He even goes in the slot from time to time. And when teams go out of their way to make certain plays for a player, you got to look into that guy because you know
Absolutely.
they're putting in packages in place for McCaffrey every chance they get.
Absolutely. So, I mean, a guy that I'm looking at really is a guy that maybe not being on a lot of guys' boards early, but still with the production levels. A guy like Lamar Miller is a guy that I look at it as I love those guys that are dual threat guys. And Lamar Miller is definitely one of those guys that's a dual threat guy, obviously from his time in Miami to Houston. Is ranked 24th on here. And maybe, I see a couple guys, and they got a couple rookies in front of them that maybe have more potential. But Lamar Miller's a guy that I think he puts up consistent fantasy numbers. And we talk about consistency. Lamar Miller actually puts up pretty consistent fantasy numbers. Is a guy that I've had before. And I'm expecting him to maintain that level of consistency through next season. And a guy I'm not too wary about is Alex Collins from Baltimore. I don't know. I saw flashes of what Alex Collins can do, and he's a big-bodied back, and he's probably going to get a majority of the carries next year. But they really it goes with consistency, and I like a guy like Lamar Miller is a lot more consistent than Alex Collins because Alex Collins will get 5 points one week, 18 one week, 3 the other week because he literally flips back and forth with him and Javaris Allen over who's going to be the fantasy back this week. So I mean, but other than that, I mean, Lamar Miller doesn't have really a lot of depth behind him, so you're relying on him a lot more than maybe other guys. Obviously, Devonta Foreman was a guy that got a little bit more carries for Houston towards the end of the season. I think he ended up getting hurt, but yeah, I mean, I'm taking Lamar Miller over a guy like Alex Collins because I'm just not too worried. I'm not worried about whether or not this guy you're really considering being a consistent back. I'm just not sure about that. Wide receivers. So now we get into the wide receivers. One guy you like, one guy you don't.
There's a lot. It's actually really tough with this receiver list, but just going through the names, one guy that jumps out at me that's really low that I thought would maybe be higher. Mohamed Sanu. He's ranked the 60th receiver on this list. Of course, he's not your big flashy guy, but he's a number 2 guy behind Julio Jones. He's done pretty well for himself, and he's another guy. He has his own plays for him. Sometimes he does like a wildcat. He throws 60-yard touchdown pass, but Mohamed Sanu, he's a guy I had on my fantasy team last year. He had a really good year. And also Julio Jones, he's going to be facing double teams almost every single game. So a guy like that he's going to consistently get you 6 catches, maybe 60 yards, a touchdown here and there. And as a second receiver, a flex pick, well, I would say flex or maybe like your first backup. I think that's definitely a good guy to look towards too. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of great wide receivers, but as a value pick, that low rated Mohamed Sanu is someone great to have. And looking up at the top of the list, someone I was never really huge, Demaryius Thomas. I think it's because I guess the standard with him was so high because he had Peyton Manning, he was having these great seasons, and then lately I just feel like he hasn't lived up to the hype. He doesn't have great hands. He drops balls from time to time. Last year the quarterback play was of course shaky. This year he picked up they had the quarterback from the Vikings, which is
Case Keenum.
Case Keenum. Case Keenum had a good year last year. The years before that, he didn't show anything great, but coming to a new team, who knows exactly how Case Keenum's going to be. It can't be any worse than what they had last year, but they also have Emmanuel Sanders taken away from Demaryius Thomas. That's just one of those situations where a guy's usually drafted pretty high, but I'm not too high on a player like Demaryius Thomas.
Yeah, and I mean, here we go looking at this, going at this list. A guy that really caught my eye is, maybe is just is a little bit too low, and that's Jarvis Landry. Obviously, you know what, you set the standard low when he goes to a different team. You really don't know how he's going to do for a team like Cleveland, and whether or not. I mean, Cleveland doesn't really have a lot of good fantasy players every year, but I mean, Jarvis Landry is a guy that, especially in those PPR leagues, that he's a guy that catches the football, and if Cleveland uses him right, that's consistency right there. I mean, he's not getting you any less than 10 points every week because of just what he's able to do, what he's able to accomplish on the field. He catches almost every ball. He can make plays with his feet. I mean, that's a guy that obviously I know him very well from my time watching him when he was in with Miami. But I think that's a guy to definitely look after because, he can start building this relationship with Tyrod Taylor, and we could see him copy that production level that he had in Miami. And then a guy I'm not too big on anymore is AJ Green because of the fact that, I think AJ Green is a top level receiver in this league. I really do, and I think that if you had the chance to take AJ Green, you should. Maybe not as early as other guys, but the thing is that AJ Green is literally on an island by himself because of the fact that, this is how you beat the Bengals. You cover AJ Green. You don't have to do anything else. And we saw that last year. They started double teaming him more, putting a safety over the top. I mean, that man can only do so much. And I think that we will start seeing AJ Green at the top of his game again when he can finally get some players around him. But AJ Green's a guy I'm not too keen on because of the fact that, he has to do everything. And, if I'm any coach and any defensive coordinator in this league, I say whenever we're playing the Bengals, that's the guy you got to cover. And it's sad because he's such a great player. He goes and high points the ball just as good as anybody else in the league. So, AJ Green, I'm not going to probably be drafting him this season because I don't see it.
Okay, now moving on to tight ends. Right off the bat, I gotta say this guy just because he was one of my favorite tight ends in the league and then dropped off when he went to Seattle. But Jimmy Graham's now on Green Bay. He's had a few off years in Seattle, but now with Aaron Rodgers, this dude is like 6'8", athletic as all can be. He's got to be primed to have a great season, in my opinion. He should be hungrier than ever. Aaron Rodgers should be hungry coming back from injury and missing the playoffs. So, Jimmy Graham, I'm expecting huge numbers. I'm hoping Saint-like numbers when he was with Drew Brees. So, Jimmy Graham, in my opinion, probably Gronk's definitely one. Travis Kelce and Graham are two and three. They could go either way, in my opinion. Travis Kelce may be a little different. He has a new quarterback now. We'll see how Patrick Mahomes uses Kelce. So, that's something definitely any fantasy owner would have to look into. And then the guy I'm worried about, just a health thing. It seems like every single year, Jordan Reed, really high up on fantasy boards. Dude can't stay healthy anytime. When you need him most, he's always out or on IR. He also has a new quarterback now. It's just a tough situation to be in for a guy as talented as he is. Always hurt, always has high expectations, loses Kirk Cousins. I'm not going to be looking at Jordan Reed on my draft board this year probably.
And I mean, I look at this tight end saying, I look at the depth and I say, man, it's just not there. I'm going to take one as probably as soon as I can, but definitely a guy that I look at every single year because of the production level he's had since he's been there is Delaney Walker. I mean, he's just been really consistent on a year in and year out basis. I mean, I take him almost every year because of the fact that he goes out there. He's really the only tight end that really catches touchdowns for the Tennessee Titans, and a guy that Marcus Mariota has built a lot of good relationship with. And I mean, he can't get rid of that production with the fact that he's just been so good for so long, and and he is getting up there in age, and they're trying to. He's been sustaining a couple injuries, but definitely a guy I look at every year is Delaney Walker, and he's ranked 7th. I think he should be a little bit higher. And then a guy I'm not too keen on is really Greg Olson. As Delaney Walker gets up there in age, so does Greg Olson. I mean, his production level has gone down within the last few years. I'm not too keen on Greg Olson really because he just he's getting older. They're
He had
not
the
looking.
foot
They're
injury
looking.
last
Yeah,
year. Yeah.
they're starting to look in different directions. He doesn't catch a lot of balls anymore. So, I would be wary about drafting Greg Olson. I know he's ranked fourth, and you know what? Maybe if he slides a little bit into like the fifth, sixth round, you say, you know what? I'm going to take Greg Olson. But I mean, I wouldn't be one of the first guys that I really look at and I take.
Okay, I think we're good there. Unless you want to talk about kickers and defenses.
It's such a broad statement,
Yeah.
but I mean, obviously, if you have the chance to take the Jacksonvilles and the Rams and on the
Yeah.
kickers, Gostowski and Justin Tucker, I feel like kickers really it changes a lot. So I mean, it's kind of hard to predict, but yeah. That's fantasy football for you. Hopefully, that if you listen to this, then you get a better insight on what it is that we do and you can apply it to your own leagues because that's what we're trying to do. As much as uh, we do this for fun, I think it was really fun that we got to share our knowledge with you, the listener, for those who actually listen to it. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what we do on a consistent basis. I mean, those are the things we look at. Those are the guys that we really look at every year. Is guys that are the production that they give, the teams that they play for. It all is just it's a lot of research, and it takes some time. But I mean, if you're really serious about wanting to win your fantasy league, and it's something that whether it's for bragging rights or it's for money, definitely listen to the few things that we said. I think we talked about a lot of good things here today, and hopefully you even by listening to this. That you could pick up a couple more wins. Obviously, what Nick said before, the disclaimer really on this episode is the fact that we're giving you what works for us. Just because you listen to this podcast doesn't mean you're automatically going to win your fantasy league. A lot of things go wrong, and that's why a lot of things went wrong for me. And it was the first year where I really didn't have a good year. It was just I ended up coming second to last place because a lot of injuries, a lot of this and that, because it is luck too. As much as it is, you can draft all these guys and you can draft this ultimate team, but in the end, maybe they just don't put up the numbers that you want them. So the disclaimer is really on this video that this isn't a this isn't a miracle video. We're not. Yeah.
Things are gonna happen. You know, Aaron Rodgers is gonna get hurt. People are gonna get suspended. You know, it happens. You know what? Some years it's just not your year, but fantasy football is one of those things. It's win or lose. It's always going to be exciting. It's always fun to watch. And anyone for listening, if you guys ever have any questions, you can always put a comment underneath the video that we have. We'll get back to you and answer you. If you have anything, we'll do our best to help you out. Just there's a lot that goes into fantasy football, and we love it. We want to share it to you guys and just try to make it better for you guys, give you guys a better chance, maybe win some money, or just brag to some of your friends.
Absolutely. That's what we tried to do, and hopefully even by listening to this and taking the advice of it, you can at least win a couple 2 to 3 more games in your fantasy leagues. But if you listen to this, you take our advice, definitely let us know if you find something that you liked and things that you're going to try, or maybe things that even work if we get later in the season. So that'll do it from us at Conn and the Stick. It's been Nick Smith. I am Justin Connolly. We'll see you next week.